Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Stern with WBRS 100.1 FM Waltham, former host of For the Record. And I'm here with Steve Hofstetter.
Oh, is this where I say hello? Hello,
Yeah,
everybody.
yes.
I didn't know if there was more than that. I don't know what was coming.
um, well, I could give you an introduction, but like for listeners who
That's
aren't
fine.
familiar,
Yeah, no, look, I'm at the point in my career right now where I'm known, but I'm not famous. Like, I'm the guy from. I'm not, like, I, I get recognized sometimes, but I can most of the time walk down the street without a problem, and that was even before masks. So, yeah, I'm not used to just being mentioned. Usually people have to explain who I am. So,
well, that's a really good segue into like my first question, which is like for listeners who aren't quite familiar with your work, like how would you describe yourself and your body of work?
I like the idea of that. Brings me to my next question. Who are you and why are you on this show?
Who are you and what are you
I'm
doing
a stand
here?
up comedian. Most people know me from, if you know me from anything, it's typically my social media. I have a total of 1.5 million followers across all of them, mainly Facebook and YouTube. I've had a whole bunch of videos go viral on those sites. I've also done some TV and some movies, and I'm on the business side of things too. I've, owned a couple comedy clubs and done some stuff like that. But most people know me from my videos.
Uh, and you've also been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize.
That is true. I am the sixth lead in Lifetime Psycho Yoga Instructor and also a Nobel Peace Prize nominee. And that is a combination no one else can say in the world.
Um, so, so actually, the Nobel Peace Prize is what WBRS was reached out to about.
Yes.
Um, so I wanted to ask a little bit about your charitable work and work during the pandemic,
Hmm.
but you also just announced yesterday, I think, the founding of the Steel City Arts Foundation. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Steel City Arts Foundation, better known as Steel City AF, because we have a sense of humor. It's very funny to see people like, you know what AF also could stand for? I'm like, yes, that is the point. The Steel City Arts Foundation, I bought a church in Pittsburgh. It actually hasn't been a church for, I think, decades, but a former church that still looks very much like a church. And we're making a comedy Hogwarts. It's going to be a live, work, play space for comedians. There'll be event space and venue rental and things like that. In a post-COVID world, there are going to be live shows, but there's also going to be a podcasting studio, a web broadcasting studio. There's going to be a home gym for comedians to use. There's editing bays and just everything a comedian needs to concentrate on their art and themselves without having to worry about a day job. There's also going to be housing for comedians as well.
So, so what's the fundamental need that inspired the creation of this space and that you're trying to address with it?
Well, comedians, until they're famous, it's very hard for a comedian to make a living. There actually, I shouldn't say that. There are tons of comedians, and this is all a pre and post COVID world. COVID has wrecked our industry, but in normal touring world, there are probably a couple of hundred comedians that you've never heard of that make a living, and there are 10,000 more that you've never heard of that can't make a living. And that's who we're trying to reach. The people who deserve to do this full time, who are good enough to do this full time, but who haven't hit yet. And so, the Martin Grant, which is how this all started, a grant in memory of my father, and then it became the Martin Foundation. The first winner of the Martin Grant was Brett Druck, who was working at a Trader Joe's at the time. And the second winner of the Martin Grant was Wyatt Gray, who lived in his aunt's garage. And then, Heather Pasternak and Teresa Lee and Brad Semituk and all these comics who were on their way, but didn't have enough money for some of the basic necessities to buy a car, to pay rent, to not have to work a job that had nothing to do with comedy. And our goal is to just help them concentrate on their art.
So this is part of essentially a years long effort on your part to help bring other people up.
Yeah, this is the sixth year of the Martin Grant, and the this year has been very different. Instead of giving one lump sum to one comedian, what we decided to do is divvy it up and do some more fundraising. And we've actually been able to give out 30 different $1,000 grants to comedians. We call it the Friendly Shoulder, and the idea is to be a bit of a bridge from the work they lost to the work they can get post COVID. Originally, we thought this was going to last a couple of months. I don't know if anybody saw it lasting this long when the shutdown of the industry started. And so we created these $1,000 grants. And when things got as bad as they did, I found this building in Pittsburgh, and I just had this vision of, wouldn't it be great if we could actually house people? Wouldn't it be great if we could build a collaborative space where people could work together and do more than just pay a month or two's of rent?
Uh, and how much of the money that goes into the Martin Foundation goes back out to other comedians?
100% of the net. We don't take any salary whatsoever. There is no one paid other than the comedians. Obviously, there are costs like, accounting and the cost of the LLC. And when we sell shirts to raise money, the cost of the actual shirt. There are the PayPal fees. But 100% of the net goes to the comedians.
That that is absolutely wonderful. And
Thank you.
also I'm of course going to be posting links to all of this in the video description. So everybody listening, look down, read a little bit more about the Martin Foundation and about Steel City AF.
Thank you. And by the way, as we grow, we're not going to be able to hold to that. As we grow, we are going to need people who are full-time employees of the foundation, whether it is to raise money or to do the accounting or to run the building and things like that. But, for now, we operate very, very lean. It's something I do as a passion project. We've had other comedians as volunteers. We have wonderful people on the board, and no one gets paid but the comics.
Uh, that's absolutely stunning. So
That's the right way to do charity.
uh, I totally agree. That's why I'm putting the links down in the description. But also, like, I'm not endorsing anything because I can't. I work for a radio station.
Absolutely. I do not expect you to endorse it. We're just providing information, and people can make their own decisions however they like.
Exactly. But cycling back to COVID stuff.
Yes.
You Steel City AF isn't the only thing that you've been doing during the pandemic.
No. We created two things. One was the Social Distancing Social Club, and that was created with Ben Glebe, Chris Bowers, and Rachel Gallagher. And that is a 4-day-a-week live stream where comedians perform live sets. It's kind of this hybrid, morning radio, late night talk show, and podcast. It's formed a really great community. The comedians get paid for their sets. Often they get paid way more than they would if, I shouldn't say often, every set they get paid way more than they would if they had done a set in New York or LA. And we've had over 170 episodes now. And then we also created Nowhere Comedy Club. So that's something I created and run with Ben Glebe. And Nowhere is a fully digital comedy venue. We have replaced over $500,000 worth of work for comedians, have had over 300 live shows there. And so between the two, we're about to crack our 500th live show during the pandemic. And it's provided a place for comedians to work, as well as a place for people who have finished Netflix to get more entertainment.
So you've done a lot of these sets. You've done some of these sets too. So what are some of the unique challenges, like both from the comedian end of things and from the business organizational end of things, of bringing comedy to a digital medium?
For the comedian end of things, it's really about not getting distracted. When you're on stage at a physical venue, the lighting is such that you pretty much can't see anything. And so you're really just in the zone of what you're talking about. Whereas you need the lighting to hit you in a different way when you're doing it digitally. And so when I first started doing it, I was like, don't get distracted by my own art on the wall. You know, like don't get distracted by where the camera is. Don't get distracted by like, oh, look at that thing over there, even though it's stuff in my own house. There's a lot in your field of vision, and you have to remember, like, look at this camera. The challenge as a business owner, you know, there's a lot of challenges. There's educating the audience to how this all works. There's educating the talent to how this works. There's the fact that we are reliant on other people's technology. We have a proprietary backend when it comes to ticketing and things like that, but we're reliant on other people's technology. And there was a time where a lot of our shows, you know, we have staff that basically runs the camera and switches it live. And Zoom changed how that worked in one update, and it totally screwed us over. And then thankfully 2 weeks later, they changed it back because they're like, oh yeah, everybody hated that. And so relying on other people's technology is probably the biggest challenge, and coming up with creative solutions for when that technology is not something we need.
That is interesting. And just how has the discipline of comedy changed kind of in light of this shift?
Well, it's one of the things as a comedian is when I write new material now, I can read it off the screen. I don't have to memorize it the first night, which is good. But also, it's hard to tell what works in the same way because different jokes work when someone's home alone watching on their couch, and when someone is in a larger environment. So that's going to be a challenge. You know, some of the stuff that short, quick stuff tends to work better digitally. And so the comics who are one-liner people, the comics who rely on puns, like that kind of stuff crushes online. You can be more physical. But the thing that it's really helped me with is being more physical, is expressions. You know, I never really paid attention to how I looked before. Speaking of that, I now have to sneeze on camera. But, I never really paid attention to what you could do with a little bit of a raise of the eyebrow. You know, what you could do with a smirk. And there are things like that that you can really notice when you're doing a digital show.
That's really fascinating. That's not a perspective that I've actually heard before, and also, yeah, I hope that the people listening also take it to heart, because it really does make such a difference from the audience experience of things.
Yeah, well, I'm over 200 shows in, so I've managed to gain a fairly unique perspective. But that said, I think the biggest change of this is for the audience because it creates a community. There are people who are our regulars who are dating now. There's someone who named a child after us. It's been really incredible to see the growth of this community, because when you go to a theater to watch a comic, you don't typically meet anybody. You might chat someone up, in line for the bathroom, or you might talk to somebody while getting a drink. But for the most part, you're just sitting where you're sitting, and then you go home. You go home with the people you came with. But on a digital show, there's that chat and feature, and that brings people together, and people become regulars, and now they've become friends. It's really wonderful to see.
All right. So we're like nearing the end of time here that I entirely arbitrarily created. Is there a question in these interviews that so you've wanted somebody to ask but nobody has?
I don't think so. I try to do a wide range of press, which, so people come at with different perspectives. And so I'm happy to answer whatever it is that people want to know.
Now,
if you need help coming up with the next question, I'm happy to do that. But
actually, believe it or not, I do have a next question prepared, and it's the absolute obvious one for anybody who's familiar with your work.
Yes.
Uh, and just again, you have a Facebook page and a YouTube channel with a huge number of videos,
Yeah.
and I do recommend checking them out. I'm subscribed to both, of course, but what is it about some people that make it think that it's a good idea to try to be witty at the person who, in your words, I think, is literally paid to be witty?
Well, and by the way, of all the heckler questions I get, this is a good one. Like the standard question I get is, is, are you afraid more people are going to heckle you? Is it real? Like dumb stuff like that. This question speaks to the psychology of it, and simply put, it's a combination of ego and alcohol. It's a combination of that. It really stems from ego. It really stems from someone watching someone else getting attention and being uncomfortable from that, not being able to be a passive part of entertainment. And that is, I think, a deep-rooted psychological problem that some people have. Hey, you're the funny one in your friend group. Everyone in your workplace thinks you're hilarious. And so then when you see someone else who professionally is funny, then you're like, oh, I could do that without doing any of the mental math of how big of a chasm there is between the two things. And that's what happens.
And you've performed in a number of countries. Have you noticed any differences in this behavior across countries?
Absolutely. There are places like, I think, so I don't know if you're familiar with tall poppy syndrome, but it basically means like when in a poppy field, when one plant grows too tall, it would take away the sun from all the other poppies, so it gets cut down. And so tall poppy syndrome is the fear of growing too tall, and so you cut yourself down in order not to stand out. Excuse me. New Zealand has a huge culture of this. I've seen it most commonly there. And the first time I ever did a show there, I thought I was bombing because I wasn't getting much reaction. And then after the show, there were all these people being like, oh, the show was great. And I was like, well, why didn't you let me know that? And so learning about the culture has really helped me. And now New Zealand has become one of my favorite places to perform because I know about this going in and I mess with them about it. I also saw that, by the way, in Japan. Japan was the most polite place I've ever been to. But then I did a show in China and it was the absolute opposite. So it was interesting to see, and that was, 2 consecutive days. It was interesting to see the difference in the cultures.
That's really fascinating. I know I've said that a lot, but thank you so much for interviewing with me, for interviewing with WBRS. And this interview is going to be up on the website, up on our YouTube actually, in the coming days. And just thank you so much.
Absolutely, Sam. Anytime I can support college radio, it's something I did when I was in college, so I'm happy to help.